New book. Investigative journalist Peter Schweizer reports that thousands of Chinese nationals are trained every year at U.S. flight schools before returning to China to serve in the regime's military. Joining us now to discuss this is Michael Lucci, founder and CEO of State Armor. Michael, good afternoon. So Schweizer says that there are at least 16 flight schools in the U.S. that do this. What do you think about the situation?
Don, this is insane. We are defining insanity here. We have flight schools that are training the United States Air Force on the front door, and in the back door, they're training China's military. So they're actually training pilots from both sides who might one day see each other in the air in combat, life or death situation. This should be an absolute non-starter. The United States Air Force should come out today and say, if you are training our pilots, you cannot train pilots for the Chinese Communist Party. Anyone training pilots for the Chinese Communist Party should lose all business with the United States Air Force today.
And Michael, here's the kicker. Some of these are taxpayer-funded airports in California and Arizona where these Chinese nationals are trained.
It's really unbelievable. So the American taxpayer is funding the airports, funding the training centers. China's military is taking advantage of it. And you just mentioned Phoenix, Arizona, where it's called AeroGuard is the flight training program there. This is right next to Luke Air Force Base. That's where we train more F-35 fighter pilots than anywhere else in the world. So Luke Air Force Base is training our most sophisticated pilots on one side of Phoenix. On the other side of Phoenix, you have this company training Chinese Communist Party pilots that will go into the Air Force, into their commercial airlines, but that's going to be one and the same. We need to stop allowing them to exploit our openness, stop allowing our openness and our strength to be sapped by the Chinese Communist Party to turn into their advantage.
Okay, Michael, can you paint us a real-world picture of the actual on-the-ground impacts? What are the national security implications of training thousands of future Chinese pilots?
There are multiple levels. I actually spoke with a pilot who trains at one of these installations earlier today, the one in Phoenix. He's a private pilot. He said that the air traffic control there has a hard time dealing with all the people who don't speak good English. They speak broken English. So that's one level of security risk. But then the most obvious is these pilots can then fly over near Luke Air Force Base, surveil assets that are extremely important there. We've caught them doing this in multiple places around the country. They're doing this at Whiteman Air Force Base. They're doing this at Barksdale Air Force Base. Exposés are revealing all of that. Well, we're letting them fly all around Luke Air Force Base. Taxpayers are actually funding that. American pilots are training Chinese Communist Party pilots. And then at the end of the day, we're training pilots that they otherwise couldn't train in China to go into their military to one day potentially fight American pilots. We need to talk about how this is borderline treason to train the military that is geared towards killing our military.
You know, Michael, I would argue there's actually something even worse than what you just described, believe it or not. Let me tell you, there's concern that Western-trained surgeons as well return to China and then carry out the forced organ harvesting, live sometimes, of prisoners of conscience. How do we prevent this? Because, you know, institutions may actually be unintentionally enabling human rights atrocities in China.
Yeah, I've heard about this. I've actually heard about this in Arizona as well, but other states around the country, because states are passing legislation to prohibit health insurance plans from reimbursing for organ transplants that occur in China. But we need a lot more than that. The federal government needs to start sanctioning those entities in China and any individuals involved with those entities in China where we know the organ transplants, the forced organ transplants are occurring. Those are often associated with the Chinese military itself. These are often military hospitals that are carrying out these human rights abuses. So doctors who are coming through those hospitals should not be coming over to the United States at all. If you're associated with any of those institutions, you just shouldn't be allowed over here. I've personally just looked around in medical centers, some that have opposed the legislation, the state legislation I just described to you. There was a medical center in Arizona that opposed that legislation. They had somebody show up opposing that legislation. We looked on their website, they had doctors that trained in the Chinese military. So it's really absurd that the Chinese military is getting a vote in our democracy, is getting training in our flight schools, is getting to sap intelligence and expertise from our universities. They're compromising us and getting us all dirtied up in their ways while sapping our strength to build up their own strength.
So what is China's end game here? What's the broader strategy? You know, whether we're talking about leveraging student visas, research partnerships, exchange programs, what is it trying to do?
They build their strength off of our strength, and then they sow chaos, they sow poison in the United States. A couple easy examples. They obviously sow fentanyl in the United States. It's the number one cause of death of military-aged men in the United States. So they're intentionally killing American men of fighting age. They're the number one cause of that in the United States. So they're sowing chaos. They're sowing poison. They go onto our campuses. They're Chinese Communist Party agents who fund radicalism on campus, whether it's communist radicalism, Islamic radicalism. They'll sow any chaos that they can. But at the same time, they're tapping into the strengths of our society to pull the best parts out and bring it back to China, often by theft, but sometimes just by legitimate training. Whichever it is, no training, no value, no expertise should ever go from the United States to the Chinese military. Right now, it's happening in all kinds of ways. We need to cut it off in all those ways.
Okay, I'll just end with this. How do we cut it off? How do we stop it?
We need to get really serious about counterintelligence at both the state and the federal level. We shouldn't be allowing anyone into our universities, into our training programs that have any association with Chinese intelligence or military. So to start, the FAA should work with the DHS to just ban the training of foreign adversary nationals in our flight schools altogether. End that. The United States Air Force should say, we're not partnering with you if you're training the Chinese military. At the state level, we need to be cutting off research partnerships with all thousands of Chinese military entities are partnered with American universities for military research. That all needs to get cut off. So we need to get serious about counterintelligence and then executing against the knowledge of the infiltration of our society.
All right, Michael, great comments today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.
U.S. forces have seized